And so it kind of took me down a little bit of my own rabbit hole about the history of the NFL Combine. I'm going to take you on a little journey here.
All right.
Because this is very interesting. I learned some things, and for the few people that might be interested in following along with this, I think it will pay off. It's very interesting to me, the background and the history of the NFL Combine. So first of all, we know it as the NFL Combine. It's actually considered the National Invitational Camp, the NIC.
Okay.
The National Invitational Camp is the Super Bowl of the player development process. It's also known as the NFL Scouting Combine. It's a 4-day invitation-only event that allows scouts to evaluate that year's top draft-eligible college players on a variety of medical, mental, and physical criteria. Only 300 or so players attend each year. Now, in addition to testing the players, the event tests the members of each NFL team's personnel department as they make decisions that will shape the future of their franchise. The Combine draws national attention as fans and media alike watch and speculate who will be drafted and where they will go. But wasn't always that way. Until the 1970s, teams typically did not give physical exams to their potential draft picks. They didn't even give physical exams to NFL draft picks until the 1970s. In 1976, the team we were just talking about, the New York Jets, became one of the very first teams to invite college seniors to team headquarters for physical exams and interviews. 1976. And what they did was they started inviting the players to come to them. So, besides character and intelligence, the other non-football thing we put a premium on is the medical aspect. Mike Hickey, the Jets director of player personnel, wrote in a column for the New York Times in April of 1983. We attempt to have every player we are interested in have an orthopedic physical by our team physicians. Hickey described how those efforts had led to 7 years of draft success, noting that nearly half of the 36 players the team drafted since 1977 were starters on the team. So, at that time, it was considered such an advantage, a competitive advantage, to give physical exams to the players that you wanted to draft.
Competitive advantage.
that the Jets had a huge edge over other teams.
Nobody else was doing this, apparently.
No one was doing this. He said it takes a lot of time and costs a lot of money, but we think it's worth it, he wrote. You have to cut down the odds of making a mistake. Now, of course, we know nowadays there's a whole industry around cutting down the odds of making a mistake and making sure that, the teams are picking the exact right players and they go through everything. So other teams, now again, keeping in mind, we're now talking about the 1983 time that he wrote this article. Other teams followed the Jets' lead, meaning that top prospects were traveling from city to city for interviews and physicals from several NFL teams. Not only was this time-consuming and expensive, but the players who were still in college often had to miss classes and were subjected to multiple X-rays and other tests. So, as more clubs adopted similar practices, Tex Schramm, the president and general manager of the Dallas Cowboys, recommended to the competition committee that teams work together to centralize the evaluation process. Now, here's where it gets interesting and slowly starts to take shape into the modern NFL Combine. In 1982, Indianapolis-based National Football Scouting Incorporated, or NFS, conducted the first National Invitational Camp in Tampa, Florida, bringing the top college draft picks to one location to get medical information for its 16 member clubs. So keep in mind, not every team was a member, but the 16 that were able to come and check it out. That camp featured 163 players, around half the number that attend today, and established the foundation for the assessment of potential draftees. Now, here's the thing. That was not the only organization running camps. 2 more camps, run by the Blesto organization and Quadra Scouting, soon were established to collect information for teams that did not partner with the NFS. So now when you move ahead to 1985, there were 3 different companies running 3 different camps for these draft picks. So the 3 camps merged to share costs. The league, the NFL, opted to have NFS, which ran the largest camp at the time, coordinate the centralized event. After holding the event in Phoenix in 1985 and in New Orleans in 1986, the NFL moved the combine to the home city of Indianapolis, where it remains today. Centralizing the camps allowed teams to conduct more thorough evaluations of draft prospects. In addition to considering a player's medical history, clubs were able to spend more time on physical and psychological testing, giving the personnel departments a more holistic impression of the player before the draft. A committee of professional NFL talent evaluators coordinates the process for selecting which prospects will attend the scouting combine. The NIC, which is the scouting combine, led by Jeff Foster, who has been president of NFS since 2005, coordinates the registration process and player logistics. As with past combines, draft-eligible prospects will not be permitted to participate in any aspect of the combine if a background check reveals a conviction of a felony or misdemeanor involving violence or use of a weapon, domestic violence, sexual offense, and or sexual assault. The NFL also reserves the right to deny participation of any prospect dismissed by their university or the NCAA. Now, individual clubs are free to evaluate any draft-eligible prospects they wish to independently, including those who've demonstrated conduct that restricted their invitation to the scouting combine. So essentially, these dudes that are getting arrested and getting into crazy trouble and stuff, teams can still check them out. They just can't do it at the combine. These evaluations may take place at any location permitted under league rules. So, as the process has expanded, so has the public's interest. Fans and media realize that the combine offers an unprecedented level of information on the league's top prospects. And so now, it's turned into this huge thing. The NFL Network, NFL.com, NFL Now, NFL Mobile, all of these different things now have grown, and you see it's all over TV, ESPN, and everywhere else talking about the NFL Combine. And so most of the time they say that it's really to validate what has already been seen on film, right? Yeah. So that's really the whole idea.
No, it's to fall in love.
But here's where it's also interesting. What's that?
No, it's to fall in love with someone who can run really fast, even though
jump really far.
Yeah, even though what the tape tells you otherwise. But yeah,
very true. Now, they say in addition to the medical examinations, NFS also schedules players' psychological tests and interviews with the clubs. Each of the 32 teams can conduct up to 60 15-minute interviews. And though it's not as important as the medical evaluations and the interviews, players still display their physical abilities for scouts, which, of course, is another component to be scheduled. So Foster's team uses technology to coordinate scheduling and collecting and sharing data. Still, he said, any change in scheduling can impact all other events. So, every April, the NFS also hosts a second medical-only event where it brings back players, usually around 50 players, to collect additional information or conduct even more tests. Now, I don't know what makes you one of those 50 players, if it's maybe somebody who was coming off of an injury or something like that, or teams want more evaluation on them. But every April, there is another event. They bring back about 50 players and reevaluate them. So I just thought it was very interesting that, none of this is even run by the NFL. It's a totally separate company from the NFL who does this entire NFL combine. You've never heard of that company. You've never heard of the organization that does it or the people that run it. And they kind of run this ancillary arm of the NFL, which every year is immensely impactful to players' livelihoods and what's going to happen and how they're viewed by teams and everything else. And it's only in Indianapolis every year because that's where the company was based, and it made it easy for them, to just start having it in their own backyard.